How you doing, guys? This is Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. This is another Prepper Trifecta video topic, which is where myself, JJ Johnson of Reality Survival, and Che of Prepper Logic are all doing a video on the same topic to be released at the same time without knowing what the other person's going to say. So then we can see, what things we have in common, what things we different opinion on, things we might not have thought of. We may even have a totally different vision of kind of what the question entails, whatnot. And then we talk about it and make some of the other videos we've done on our live stream, which will be, for this one, should be tomorrow. So if you're watching this video in the future, at some point, the live stream should already be up, but it'll be pre-recorded, obviously, but then you can watch us talk about these topics then. Topic for this video is 10 things for your community to do post shit hit the fan. So as I mentioned in the other video, this is assuming a very large, wide-scale shit the fan event, something like a total, grid down event of some kind. Doesn't really matter what it is, but the obvious implication is that it's major, widespread, and would be long-lasting, and you have some sort of community or mutual aid group of some kind that, more than like 5 people, obviously. You're talking about at least a decent-sized group. Doesn't really matter exactly how big it is, but some sort of fairly significantly sized group. My thoughts on this is that I didn't want to get into too many really specific things that are logistically related and stuff, because that list, it wouldn't make sense to only have 10 about like raising chickens, raising pigs, form a garden, you know what I mean? So for my list, these things are all more, I don't want to say philosophical, but they're more about just overarching kind of guidelines for what type of things you would want to be doing long term, just kind of missions per se for the group. These are no specific order of importance. These are all just the list top 10. I'll number them so I make sure I get up through them all, but not necessarily, number 1 isn't necessarily more important than number 10 and vice versa. But the first one is fairly important, and that would be to protect your members. That's basically the entire idea and purpose behind any sort of mutual aid group or community in a post-shit-hit-the-fan scenario. So that's obviously very important. You want to protect your members. Sometimes that might mean doing some offensive actions, if there's some sort of hostile group that is going to be a problem, that might be necessary in some sort of military type action. But for the most part, it would just be everything involved in security and food, sustaining, and just basically taking care of its members. That's the entire point of a group. And so obviously that's one of the main things that a group would be doing in a post-shit-the-fan scenario, is protecting and sustaining its members. Number 2 would be to protect other people when possible. It's not necessarily always going to be possible, and the priority would be the members that are already in the group. But if there's some ability to either protect or sustain people who are outside the group, that would be important too. And we're talking about a situation where, not just survival is not the only consideration. You want to focus on rebuilding and, getting back into some form of civilization at some point. And that's what a lot of these are going to be focused on, because if you have a significant, stable community, these are things that you'd really want to be focusing on, really want, try to make an effort to improve in these areas. But you can't do that without having a stable group. So that's why the safety and sustaining the members in the group is the most important thing. But then taking care of other people is obviously very important as well. So that's number 2, is protecting or sustaining people outside the group when possible. Number 3 would be food production and just resource production in general, because you're not necessarily just going to want to have to sustain yourselves or rely on stored food or scavenging, especially, like I said, when you're talking about long-term kind of increasing your community, building something, maybe even building a new country or whatever, new nation. Who knows what would happen depending on how serious the event is. But you want to be able to produce food and other resources. So that means not just stored food, but working on farming, working on gardening, working on all sorts of stuff like that, increasing your capabilities to actually produce and not just use what you already have or scavenge things that are already out there. Number 4 would be to get new members and expand your group. That could be expand by the number of members, like I said, getting new members, and also expanding your scope, just area, just the magnitude of everything you're doing, your farming operations, your gardening, your production, just expanding in general. More members, bigger operation, everything, because that's going to give you more security. It's going to allow you to do all the other things on this list more effectively and more efficiently, and just increases your survivability to have a larger, more significant area, larger group of members, all sorts of things. You would obviously have to be very careful in bringing new people into the group, you'd have to come up with some pretty strict, pretty well thought out protocols for how you decide who's going to be in the group, the process for introducing them, the kind of rights and stuff that powers that they would have being a new member, and when that might expand, things like that, because the last thing you want to do is bring a bunch of people in and have that end up being a problem. But at the same time, you don't just never want to increase the size of your group by bringing in new people, because then you'll eventually, probably disappear. You certainly won't be able to do a lot of the other things on this list if you don't increase the size of your group. My rule number 5 would be to create some sort of commerce and economy, even just within your group, but potentially outside of it as well. I think it'd be very important to set up different systems, some kind of monetary system if you have something that makes sense, or at the very least some sort of just basic business bartering, whatever you want to do. That's a great incentive for people to be productive, is the ability for them to gain from their efforts. And it also is just you'll have to have some baseline of some sort of economic system to really be able to improve your group or move on to more complex types of governance, or just expand the group or anything like that. You're really going to have some sort of economic system, some sort of financial system, and at the very least, a way for people to trade and buy and sell and things like that. And ideally, obviously, you want to do that with people outside the group as well, setting up some sort of method that people can do that easily and effectively, and certainly within the group as well. I think just setting up a basic commerce and economic system is going to be hugely important for especially down the road. Obviously, in the initial stages of any major event, you're not necessarily going to be too worried about someone selling handmade furniture or how you're going to figure this stuff out. The survival would be the most important aspect at that point. But long term, you're really going to have a way for people to, trade the production of their farms, actually come up with other goods and services other than just, direct barter, things like that, but a way to actually compensate people for labor and things like that makes sense. Number 6 is for the group to create or rebuild different types of infrastructure. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same way that they were before. You don't have to, necessarily rebuild the existing infrastructure that might be damaged. It might not make sense depending on the area or the scope of what you're doing. But increasing somehow from living at the basics, just subsistence level of whatever got you through the initial stages of this event, and then just increasing from there. Like I said, the theme of all these points here is, rebuilding and expanding, basically, and at least maybe not necessarily trying to get back to the way life was, but just increasing the quality of life, increasing the level of technology that you have. So if you have a way to, get more people electricity or running water, or build different kinds of roads or pathways, or even just, like I said, it's kind of related to the commerce thing that I mentioned before, but just in many ways, in whatever ways possible, increasing your infrastructure and your ability to do things like that. Maybe this would be for sanitation, sewers, things like that. Like I said, running water, might be building or rebuilding different types of machinery so you don't have to do things by hand. All of that is going to pay huge dividends when it comes to your ability to do everything else on this list. Number 7 kind of goes along with this as well, and that's expand communications capabilities. That could be everything from nodes of radio communication to creating a postal system like in the Postman, to where you can have communication between different colonies or whatever, but you can't really have a modernized society or community without having pretty decent ways of communicating relatively quickly. You would have to start, sort of at the lower levels, with maybe just one main radio outpost or something per building or village or whatever you want to do, and then maybe, like I said, maybe some sort of mail system once things stabilize. But just some method of increasing communications capabilities is going to just be hugely important for being able to rise your community up from whatever, like I said, whatever basic kind of survival subsistence level it started at. Communications are going to be like a cornerstone of being able to do a lot more of these projects, a lot more of the things on this list. It would, you can still do it with rudimentary communications for most of these things, but it's going to take a lot longer and just be more resource intensive and everything if you don't have better ways of communication and spreading information. And the ability to share information quickly, even news or warnings, that's all going to be helpful for everything else too, for everything from security to just like governance and legal stuff, and the commerce, obviously, like I mentioned before, the infrastructure. All that's going to be very, very dependent on decent communication. So it's important to kind of, if you can, to build on whatever you have. Might be starting out with walkie-talkies and might move up from there, but increasing it in some way, whatever way is possible, is going to be important. Number 8 would be to educate. This is obviously going to start within your group. Everything from teaching children, making sure that they, anyone who's young learns all the stuff that they need to, learns how to read, learns how to do basic arithmetic, to the adults and sharing knowledge that's within the group, making sure that not just one person knows how to do certain things. It's kind of easy to forget in our modern society with how easy it is to get information, how, in a situation where there's no information capability, really, at least compared to now, how easy it would be for people not to know certain things, or for incorrect information like wives' tale type stuff to get spread really quickly. So having, storing whatever information you can, even textbooks or things like that, would be important. Having people actually teach the information that they already know that could be useful is going to be really important. And especially the longer you get into whatever this event would be, years down the road, things like this are going to be even more important, because otherwise you would just be stuck at the position that you're in unless you're able to teach new people things that they didn't already know, teach young people things that they need to know, like I said, learning and math and all the basic stuff. And it's going to be very important to create some kind of educational system. Doesn't even have to be like a college or something, but relying on, like I said, the communication infrastructure that you've hopefully been able to build, and then use that to also spread useful information to educate people about basically anything that they would need to know, from farming and weather patterns and stuff like that to just basic reading, writing, and everything in between. Number 9 is for the community to record events or any sort of historical data. In this kind of scenario that we're using for this topic, obviously some crazy stuff has happened, and there's not going to be the normal kind of infrastructure or methods of data collection, things that might never be written down by a lot of people. They might never be certainly recorded on video or anything like that. So it'd be really important for a community that has its shit together to, document as much of what's going on and what's happened as possible. They may, maybe the only record of the way certain things happened, of how certain people died, for family members to find out later, and even things that were discovered or learned, depending on what the situation was. You want to have some record of that for posterity. There's just a whole ton of reasons why just writing down or documenting all the stuff that you're doing and all the stuff that's been happening could be really important, or at the very least, very, historically significant. The last point, number 10 of what the top 10 things that a community should do after shit the fan, is to entertain and enhance lives. I don't think that that's, obviously something super, super important when it comes to survival, but when you're talking about long-term, if just surviving isn't necessarily going to be good enough. You want to thrive. And if you have a fairly large community, and especially if you're doing all this other stuff on there, you want to have some, things that you're doing to actually enhance people's quality of life, and not just be a worker ant. You want to be able to have like sporting events, maybe put on plays or different kind of art shows, or just have things that, just make life enjoyable. Do different things that are actually make it worthwhile that you've survived this event. You don't just, like I said, want to survive and be some sort of worker bee who's surviving just for the sake of surviving. The reason we want to survive is because there's a lot of things in life that are enjoyable to do. So kind of working towards maintaining or increasing or rebuilding that kind of ability to just have fun, to enjoy life and do all these other things, I think would be really important. And it's probably something that wouldn't be on a lot of people's, important list for after shit the fan, but I think it would be very difficult for people to be productive and be do all the things that they need to do long term if you've taken all the kind of joys out of their life and all the things that they enjoy doing. And I think people would really be trying hard to put those back in their lives anyway. So it would be very, very good for the community to be working as a group to be able to do those things, because it would happen a lot easier if it's done as a group and not everyone individually trying to add some sort of entertainment into their lives individually. If you could do it as a community, things would happen a lot faster. They would happen a lot better. You could work around, security and other issues if you're doing it as a group. Have some people on guard duty while you're playing movies, and then swapping out, so other people can watch the movie too, or whatever you do. From the first moments of the event to years later, I still think it would be a very important consideration to have some sort of entertainment, some sort of, just cultural things that you could do within the group to just make life enjoyable. So that was my top 10 list of 10 things that the community should do after Shit the Fan event. Looking forward to seeing what the other guys say in their videos. You can check out the links to their channels in the description box of this video, as well as links to these t-shirts and all sorts of other good stuff. So check it out. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.